The dining room smelled like roasted chicken and expensive wine. My dad had set the table with the good plates and tall candles, the kind of setup he only used when he wanted to impress someone. I knew what tonight was. A business dinner. A performance. I was just part of the backdrop. His business partner, Mr. Aldrich Bowen, sat across the table with calm, steady eyes. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and quiet confidence that needed no announcement. My mom sat beside my dad, smiling the way she always did when she wanted everything to appear fine. My younger brother, Cole, was picking at his food. I had driven 2 hours to be here. My dad hadn't asked me to come. My mom had called and said it would mean a lot. So I came. Dinner started well. Small talk, safe questions. My dad laughed loudly at his own jokes the way he did when he was nervous. Then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, my dad leaned back in his chair. He looked at me with that familiar expression, the one that had followed me my whole life like a shadow. He said it clearly, loudly, without hesitation. You. A failure. Always have been. The table went completely silent. Nobody moved. My mom stared at her plate. Cole glanced up once, then back down at his food. The candles kept flickering like nothing had happened. Like those words hadn't landed in the middle of the room and broken something. My chest tightened. My throat closed just a little. I had trained myself not to cry in front of him. Years of practice. I pressed my feet flat against the floor, breathed slowly, and kept my face still. My dad laughed after a second, waving his hand. She's always been more of a dreamer than a doer, he said, turning toward Mr. Bowen like that explained everything. But Mr. Bowen didn't laugh. He set his fork down slowly, the way someone does when they've decided to pay attention. He looked at my dad for a moment, then turned to me. His eyes were steady. Not pitying. Just watching. If she's a failure, he said in a calm, even voice, then why is her name on the draft I reviewed this afternoon? The air in the room changed instantly. My dad's laugh faded. His smile stayed, but it had gone stiff at the edges, the way a mask looks when the person underneath stops trying. Everyone looked at me. Something deep in my chest began to stir. My dad recovered quickly. He always did. He chuckled and reached for his wine glass. Oh, that, he said lightly. Just some old notes I pulled together. She helped out a little, a long time ago. Nothing significant. But Mr. Bowen was still looking at me. Not at my dad. At me. Tell me, he said. What do you know about the distribution model in the proposal? The table tensed. I could feel my dad's eyes on me, sharp, warning. The kind of look that said, be careful. Don't embarrass me. I had spent years reading that look. Shrinking from it. Adjusting myself to fit inside the space he left for me, which was never very much. But Mr. Bowen had asked a direct question. And the answer was forming immediately, because I knew that proposal. Not because I had glanced at it. Because I had built it. I answered carefully. I talked about the two-phase entry strategy, the regional pilot model, the risk buffer I had written in specifically because the original numbers were too aggressive for an untested market. I watched Mr. Bowen's expression as I spoke. He nodded once. Slowly. My dad said nothing. But when I glanced at him, his smile had pulled tight. His jaw was set. Something was cracking. 3 years earlier, I sat at a small desk in the corner of my dad's home office. I was 22. Fresh out of college, carrying a business degree paid for mostly with scholarships and part-time work. My dad's distribution company was stuck, same 10 clients, same flat numbers, no path forward. I saw the problem clearly. I had studied cases exactly like it. So I started working. Late nights. Weekends. I mapped out a full market entry strategy. 2 phases, regional pilots, conservative projections with room to expand. I built a risk model. I wrote a 40-page document and left it on his desk on a Thursday morning with a note. Dad, I think this could help. He read it. I know he did because pages were moved. But he never mentioned it. 2 weeks later he came home excited, talking about a new direction for the company. He used words I recognized. Phrases I had written. He never said my name. I told myself he had come to the same conclusions independently. I told myself it was coincidence. I was good at telling myself things that made it easier to keep showing up. Now, sitting at that dinner table, hearing Mr. Bowen quote figures I remembered typing, I finally understood. There was no coincidence. The conversation moved forward. Mr. Bowen asked about the execution timeline. How long before the first pilot could launch, what the key benchmarks would be. My dad answered smoothly at first. He was good at sounding confident. But I was listening closely now, and I heard it, the thin places in his answers. Moments where confidence was covering something hollow underneath. Then Mr. Bowen asked about the contingency clause. The one built into the contract to protect against early market failure. I knew that clause. I had written it myself after reading about a failed retail expansion in one of my college textbooks. It was specific. Unusual. Not something someone lands on without a deliberate reason. My dad paused. A beat too long. Right, yes, standard protection. I worked with a consultant on those details, he said. I looked at my plate. I was the consultant. Unpaid. Unnamed. Invisible. I said quietly, there's actually a gap in that clause. My dad's head turned. Excuse me. The contingency only triggers after 60 days, I said. But the standard exposure window in this type of deal is 45. There's a 15-day gap where the company has no protection. Mr. Bowen leaned forward slightly. That's enough, my dad said sharply. You don't need to. Let her finish, Mr. Bowen said. My dad stopped talking. That alone was remarkable. He was not a man who stopped when someone asked him to. He filled rooms with his voice, his opinions, his certainty. Silence did not suit him. But Mr. Bowen had said it quietly, and my dad had obeyed. I watched Mr. Bowen for the rest of the meal. He asked questions, some to my dad, some to me, and his eyes were always measuring. He wasn't making conversation. He was building a picture. My dad kept explaining. He talked about his vision, his leadership, his experience. He name-dropped clients and mentioned revenue figures. He was performing, working to keep Mr. Bowen's attention from drifting back to me. But attention has its own gravity. At one point my dad described the research behind the market selection. He said he had spent months analyzing competitor positioning across 3 regional markets before choosing the final 2. I had done that research in 6 weeks. I still had the spreadsheet, color-coded by risk level. I remembered finishing it late one night after spilling coffee on my keyboard and drying it with a blow dryer at 2 in the morning. Mr. Bowen glanced at me while my dad was speaking. I said nothing. I didn't need to. After dinner, while my mom cleared plates and Cole disappeared into the living room, I excused myself. I stood at the bathroom sink with cold water running over my wrists and thought clearly. I still had the files. I had never deleted them. Not because I planned to use them someday. I hadn't been that strategic. I had kept them the way you keep old journals. Because they were mine. Because they represented months of quiet work that no one had acknowledged, and deleting them felt like agreeing they never mattered. The original proposal was on an external drive at my apartment. Dated. Time-stamped. Version histories going back to the first rough draft. The research spreadsheets sat in a folder labeled Dad Company Project, 2021. The emails were still in my sent folder, messages I had sent to myself to preserve each draft as I finished it. I had not planned for this moment. But I had accidentally prepared for it. My heart was beating faster. Not from fear. From something between dread and possibility, the feeling of standing at an edge that could tip either way. I looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. Then I turned off the tap and walked back to the table. Dessert arrived, my mom's apple cake, the one she made for important guests. She brought it out carefully, proud of it. For a moment the table softened. Mr. Bowen complimented it genuinely. My mom smiled, and it was a real smile this time. My dad relaxed slightly. He thought the storm had passed. I let him think that. I had made a decision at the bathroom sink. I was not going to react. Not tonight. Not at this table. Reacting was what he expected. He had spent years knowing exactly how to push me until I either went quiet or got emotional, and either way he won. So I ate my cake. I smiled when it was appropriate. I let the conversation breathe around me like I was simply a guest. But I was listening to everything. Every time my dad explained the proposal, I filed the words away. Every time he took credit for a decision I remembered making, I noted it. Every gap, every hesitation, every glossed over detail, I collected it quietly, the way you gather evidence without letting anyone see you looking. He was building his case out loud. I was building mine in silence. The difference was that mine was true. Mr. Bowen set down his dessert fork and folded his hands on the table. I want to ask you something directly, he said to my dad. About execution. My dad straightened. Of course. Ask anything. The 2 pilot markets, Mr. Bowen said. Walk me through how you selected them. Not the broad strokes, the actual criteria. Why those 2 and not the others on the shortlist? My dad nodded and reached for his wine glass, a stall I recognized immediately. The selection was really about balancing risk against opportunity, he began. We looked at several factors. Which factors? Mr. Bowen pressed. In what order of priority? My dad paused. One beat too long. Population density was the primary driver, he said. Then existing competitor presence. Mr. Bowen said nothing. And infrastructure, logistics infrastructure. That played a role too. What role exactly? Mr. Bowen asked. Another pause. Longer. It was a weighting factor in the scoring model, my dad said. What weighting did you assign it? My dad guessed. I knew it was a guess because I knew the real number. The infrastructure variable had been weighted at 12%, a careful choice made after running 3 sensitivity tests. Not a round number. Not an obvious one. My dad said 20%. It was wrong. The silence that followed was deliberate. Mr. Bowen let it sit, full and heavy, and did not rush to fill it. My dad tried. Give or take, of course. These things shift during refinement. He laughed, short and flat. Mr. Bowen did not laugh. He turned to me. What would you have done differently with the pilot selection? He asked. The table went still. My mom's hand stopped moving on the tablecloth. Cole looked up from his phone for the first time all night. My dad's expression went rigid, not angry yet, but the kind of close with very little distance left to travel. I had spent so many years in rooms like this, rooms where I had the answer and swallowed it. Rooms where I made myself smaller so he could seem larger. Rooms where I watched him take up all the space and told myself it was fine. But Mr. Bowen was looking at me. Not past me. Not through me. At me. Like I was the person in the room who might actually have something worth hearing. I took a slow breath. I thought about every late night, every ignored document, every moment I had shrunk to fit inside the space he allowed. Then I answered. The pilot selection criteria were sound, I said. But the weighting was off. Infrastructure shouldn't be at 20%. Closer to 12 makes more sense. The markets we're targeting already have established logistics networks. What needed more weight was purchase behavior data. It was sitting at 8%, but it's the stronger predictor in an untested regional market. I kept my voice calm. Even. The contingency clause gap comes from anchoring the trigger date to contract signing instead of market entry. Shift the reference point to first delivery and it closes the 15-day window, strengthening both sides. Mr. Bowen was nodding. Slowly, steadily, the way someone nods when pieces they suspected are finally clicking into place. And the risk buffer? He asked. It needs a fixed floor, I said. Right now it's percentage-based with no minimum. In a slow first quarter, which is realistic for a new market, the buffer becomes too small to matter. A floor of around 80,000 gives it real protection. I stopped speaking. The room was completely quiet. My dad had not said a single word. Mr. Bowen looked at me for a long moment. Then he placed both hands flat on the table and pushed back his chair. Would you mind stepping outside with me for a few minutes? Mr. Bowen said. To me. Just to me. My dad's chair scraped the floor immediately. Aldrich, if there's something to discuss about the deal, I should be part of. I'd like to speak with her, Mr. Bowen said. Still calm. Still quiet. He didn't need volume. My dad opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, something that had fear moving underneath it, like a current under still water. I stood up. I smoothed my jacket. I followed Mr. Bowen toward the front of the house, past the framed family photos on the hallway wall, past my school portrait from 8th grade where I was smiling too wide because I had been nervous that day. We stepped onto the front porch. The night air was cool. The street was quiet and dark beyond the reach of the porch light. Mr. Bowen turned to face me. He studied me the way serious people study things they want to understand completely. Not rushing. Not softening it. Just looking. The sounds from inside the house felt very far away suddenly. Then he asked his question. 3 words. Plain and direct. Did you create this deal? My pulse was beating hard in my ears. Not because I was unsure of the answer. I had always known the answer. But because saying it out loud, to this man, at this moment, meant that everything after this would be different. My whole life I had been careful around my dad. Careful not to show him up. Careful to keep my contributions small enough that he never felt threatened by them. I had shrunk myself to a size that fit comfortably in his shadow and done it so long I had almost forgotten I was doing it. Standing on that porch, in the cool night air, with Mr. Bowen waiting, I felt the full weight of all that shrinking. He was not setting a trap. He was not performing. He was asking me a plain, honest question and waiting for a plain, honest answer. My hands were steady. My breathing was steady. But underneath that, something was hammering, not fear exactly, but the particular pressure that builds right before you say something true that you cannot unsay. I looked at Mr. Bowen directly. I thought about the 40-page document on a Thursday morning. I thought about him never saying my name. Yes, I said. I did. I told him everything. Not dramatically. Not with anger or tears. I told him the facts, the way you read a timeline. This happened, then this, then this. I told him I was 22 when I built the first draft. Late nights at the corner desk in my dad's home office. The research spreadsheets. The competitor analysis. The risk model. The version history on all my files. The emails I had sent to myself to preserve each draft as I went. The 40-page document left on his desk on a Thursday morning. I told him my dad never mentioned it. That 2 weeks later he came home talking about a new direction, using my words, my structure, my numbers. I told him I had convinced myself it was coincidence. That I was good at telling myself things that made it easier to keep showing up. I told him I still had every file. Dated. Time-stamped. Untouched. Mr. Bowen listened without interrupting once. He stood with his hands in his jacket pockets and let me speak until there was nothing left to say. When I finished, the street was quiet. A car passed slowly at the far end. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and stopped. I waited. His face gave nothing away. He was quiet for a moment. Then he let out a slow breath, not a sigh, but the sound of someone setting something heavy down. I suspected, he said. From the very first meeting. I looked at him. Your father knew the surface, he said. The numbers, the structure, the broad picture. But whenever I pushed past the surface, he lost the thread. He didn't know why the decisions had been made. He only knew what they were. He paused. The person who builds something knows the why, he said. Every choice has a reason behind it. Every number has a story. If you can't tell me the story, you didn't build it. I said nothing. I was still taking in the fact that he had suspected all along. That he had come to this dinner not just to finalize a deal, but to find out the truth. Tonight was a test, he said. I needed to see who was in that room. Who actually understood the work. He looked at me steadily. You passed it, he said. Your father did not. Those words settled over me slowly. Not with triumph. Not with relief. More like standing in a room after a storm, finally understanding the full size of what just happened. Mr. Bowen turned slightly, looking out at the quiet street. "I want you to understand what's actually at stake," he said. He told me the numbers. The deal was a 3-year partnership with a projected total value of $4.2 million. Expansion clauses were built in. If the pilot succeeded, which his analysts believed they would, Phase 2 could nearly double that figure. Licensing rights were tied to the distribution model, meaning whoever held credit as its architect would carry significant leverage going forward. "My company has been building toward this for 2 years," he said. "I don't move forward with people I cannot trust. That is not a preference, it is a rule. I broke it once, long ago, and it cost me considerably." He turned back to me. "Your father presented himself as the mind behind this work. If that were true, I would have a real partner. But it is not true. A partnership built on a false foundation does not hold." He let that sit. "If I proceed with his version," he said, "I'm handing millions of dollars and 3 years of my company's energy to someone who cannot explain the work he claims to have done." He shook his head once. "I will not do that." He looked at me steadily. The porch light was soft. The street was still. "I don't want his version of this deal," Mr. Bowen said quietly. "I want yours." I heard the words. But for a second they didn't feel real, like they were meant for someone standing slightly to my left. Someone more prepared for this moment. My whole life I had done the work and watched someone else receive the credit. I told myself it was fine. That family came first. That my time would come eventually, somewhere else. That the work was enough even when the recognition never arrived. And now a man I had met 3 hours ago was telling me he wanted to build something with me specifically. Not because I had pushed my way in. Because the work had spoken clearly enough on its own. "What exactly are you offering?" I asked. My voice was steady. "A proper contract in your name," he said. "As lead architect. Full credit, full compensation, full authority over execution." He said the number. It was real and significant. "I need your answer by end of week," he said. "But I wanted to ask you tonight. Face to face. Before you walked back in there." My breath caught. The night was very quiet around us. I stood on that porch and felt the full weight of the decision. My dad was inside. My mom was inside, the woman who had called 2 weeks ago and said it would mean a lot if I came. Cole was inside, my younger brother who still looked up to my dad the way I once had, before I understood what that could cost you. My dad had called me a failure at his own dinner table, in front of a guest, without hesitating. Not in a moment of anger. Not as a slip. He had said it comfortably, like a fact everyone already agreed on, and he was simply willing to say out loud. And the work he had used to build his reputation, sitting on a table worth millions, that was mine. My late nights. My research. My belief that his company could be something better. He had taken all of it. And he had never said my name. I thought about what saying yes would cost me. My dad's anger. The family story that would need rewriting. Then I thought about what saying no would cost me. I had already been paying that price for 3 years. I looked at Mr. Bowen. "I'll do it," I said. We walked back inside together. I noticed it before anyone spoke, the way the room shifted the moment we came through the door. My mom looked up quickly from the plates she was stacking. Cole put his phone face down on the table. My dad, who had been standing near the window with his arms crossed, straightened the moment he saw us. He looked at Mr. Bowen first, trying to read his expression. Then at me. Then back at Mr. Bowen. His jaw tightened. He could feel the change that had happened outside, even without knowing its exact shape. He was a man who had spent decades reading and controlling rooms. Right now the room was telling him something he didn't like at all. "Everything all right?" he said carefully, with a practiced smile. Mr. Bowen moved to his chair. He settled himself, smoothed his jacket, and placed both hands flat on the table. He didn't answer right away. My mom stood near the kitchen doorway, very still. Cole had gone quiet in that particular way of someone sensing something serious is unfolding nearby and not knowing whether to stay. Nobody left. Mr. Bowen looked at my dad. "I have something I'd like to say," he said quietly. "To everyone at this table." My dad laughed. A short, hollow sound that didn't fit the silence around it. "Of course," he said, spreading his hands. "What's on your mind, Aldrich?" Mr. Bowen did not smile. "I've reviewed this proposal thoroughly," he said. "For several weeks I've had questions, not about the quality of the work, which is genuinely strong. My questions were about authorship." My dad's smile held, but something behind his eyes shifted. "Having spoken at length with your daughter tonight," Mr. Bowen continued, "I've made a decision about how I want to move forward." "And," my dad said, "controlled. Working hard to stay even. I will only proceed with this deal if she leads it," Mr. Bowen said. "As the named architect of the distribution model and primary partner on execution." The room went completely still. My dad looked at Mr. Bowen, then at me, then back at Mr. Bowen. Then he laughed again, louder, stretched thin at the edges. "Come on, Aldrich. She's not involved in the company. She's been, look, I appreciate you being kind to her, but..." "I'm not being kind," Mr. Bowen said simply. "I'm being accurate." Nobody else laughed. Not my mom. Not Cole. The room was just still and full and waiting. My dad's smile dropped. What replaced it was harder, something between anger and the early stages of panic, pressed flat trying to look like neither. "I don't know what she told you out there," he said, voice dropping lower. "But whatever it was." "I'd like to show you something," I said. I reached into my bag. I had brought a folder to review during the drive, old documents I had been organizing recently. Inside were printouts I had made months ago. Drafts. Dated versions. 2 emails I had sent to myself, version 4, final structure and risk model, updated the 14th of November, 2021. I placed them on the table. Not dramatically. Just set them down the way you set down a fact. Mr. Bowen looked at them calmly. He did not seem surprised. My mom moved closer and looked at the dates. My dad stared at the papers. He did not touch them. "These are old notes," he said tightly. "She helped with early drafts. That's different from..." "The contingency clause," Mr. Bowen said quietly. "The infrastructure weighting. The pilot scoring model. The risk buffer floor." He paused. "All of it is in these pages. Dated before your company's presentation to my team." Silence. Complete silence. My dad pushed back from the table hard. "This is unbelievable," he said. His voice had climbed, the control completely gone. "You come to my house. My dinner table. And you," he pointed at me, hand trembling. "You've been sitting here all night just waiting to do this." "Dad," I started. "Don't," he snapped. "Don't stand there acting like the victim. Everything I built for this family. And you want to tear it down over some old files." "I didn't dig them up," I said. "I never deleted them." "You are ungrateful," he said, voice rising. "I gave you every opportunity. I gave you everything. And you pull this here, tonight, in front of..." "You never said my name," I said calmly. "Not once. You used my work for years and you never told a single person I existed. Because it wasn't ready. I shaped it into something real." "What was the infrastructure weighting?" Mr. Bowen asked. My dad stopped cold. The question sat in the room, plain and unavoidable. "In the pilot scoring model," Mr. Bowen said evenly. "What percentage did you assign to infrastructure?" My dad said nothing. The silence gave everyone the only answer they needed. The room had gone completely still. My dad stood with his hands at his sides, face tight. The anger was still there, but underneath it now was something else, something smaller. For the first time I could remember, he looked uncertain. My mom sat with her hands folded in her lap. Cole stared at the table. I looked at my dad. I had imagined a moment like this before, not this exact scene, but something like it. In my imagination, it felt like winning. Standing inside the actual moment, it felt quieter than that. Heavier. "I stopped trying to get you to see me a long time ago," I said. Not loudly. Just clearly. I kept doing the work because I believed in it. Then I stopped expecting it to matter to you. He didn't say anything. You called me a failure tonight, I said. At your own table. In front of everyone. Without hesitating. I let that sit for a moment. So I stopped trying to succeed for you, I said. I stopped a long time ago. Tonight just made it official. The silence after that was complete. The candles had burned low. My dad looked at me and for the first time, I could not read his expression at all. Mr. Bowen reached into his jacket and placed a document on the table. A few clean pages, clipped together. I could see the header, his company name, the deal title, a signature line at the bottom. He slid it across the table toward me. Not toward my dad. Toward me. I had my assistant prepare this yesterday, he said. After our call last week, I had already decided, regardless of tonight. Tonight simply confirmed it. My dad stared at the document without speaking. I picked up the pages and read carefully. My name was at the top, lead partner and distribution architect. The terms were exactly what Mr. Bowen had described on the porch. The number was there, real and official. I took my time. Every clause. Every line. Mr. Bowen waited without rushing me. My mom stood near the kitchen doorway. My dad had not sat back down. I reached the signature line. I thought about the girl who had stayed up past 2 in the morning, drying her keyboard with a blow dryer after spilling coffee. Building something she believed in for a father who would never say her name. I picked up the pen. And I signed. That was 14 months ago. The first pilot launched 8 weeks after I signed. The second followed 12 weeks later. Both performed above projection. The purchase behavior data, weighted correctly, proved to be the predictor I said it would be. The risk buffer floor held through a slow first quarter and protected both sides as designed. By month 10, Mr. Bowen's team was drafting phase 2. My name was on everything. Not as a footnote. As the architect, I hired a small team. 3 sharp people who asked why and meant it. We worked well. I spoke to my mom occasionally. Short calls. Once she said quietly that she was proud of me. I believed her. My dad and I had not spoken since that night. I didn't know if that would change. I had stopped waiting for him to become something different and started building my life around what was actually true. Mr. Bowen once told me the best deals he made started with someone who knew the work deeply enough to defend every choice. I had always known the work. I had just spent years defending it to the wrong person. He called me a failure at his dinner table. That was the last time he ever got to decide who I was.